I would first like to thank the UPF for having us all here. And I hope anyway, that this is the last time we ever have a Korean peace conference. I hope the next time we meet, well, first I should point out to you that South Korea spends billions of dollars on bullets and guns. North Korea spends an even larger amount of its economy on bullets and guns. So can you imagine how much money we would have if we didn't have to spend money on guns and bullets and tanks? I hope the next time we meet, we don't have a peace conference. I hope we meet in the DMZ. I'll bring the Rolling Stones. You bring Blackpink. North Koreans can bring whoever they want. And we'll have a big party. And Julia Moon, you all know Julia Moon, but she can bring her dancers. My goodness, we'll have a very, very good party when we meet in the DMZ next time, which is my hope. I hope we never do this again. Some of you know that I spent 3 years driving around the world with my then fiancée, now my wife, Paige Parker. We drove 245,000 kilometers through 116 countries. And as you can see, we got into the Guinness Book of World Records because I'm the first fund manager to drive around the world. So for me, it was easy to get into the Guinness Book of Records. As you can see, we went to 116 countries. I'll show you this because it gave me the perspective to realize that the Korean Peninsula, that Hanbok-do, could be or will be the single most exciting place in the world once you open the DMZ. If you put together North Korea with cheap, disciplined, educated labor, lots of natural resources, and South Korea with huge amounts of capital and expertise, you have 80 million people on the Chinese border. It is going to be unbelievably exciting. So after we finish our party at the DMZ with the Rolling Stones and Blackpink and everybody else, we're going to have a very, very vibrant and exciting economy here. One of the things that my wife and I did when we finished after 3 years on the road, we stopped to rest for a while. Well, one result of resting for a while is we now have a baby girl. And I want you to know, I never had a child before. I didn't want children. I thought children were a terrible, terrible waste of time. I felt so sorry for my friends who had children, ruined their lives. Well, I want you to know I was completely wrong. This little girl changed my life. It's been so much fun. It's a lot of fun. So if any of you haven't done it, and you're the right age, I hope you will go home. Maybe you shouldn't take a day off. These are difficult times. But go home for lunch one day and have a kid. You will thank yourselves. It will be a lot of fun. My wife and I went home for lunch one day, and as you can see, we had another one. I took my own advice. I'm not just standing here talking. Everything I talk about, I do. And by the way, as you can see, it's another daughter. I know that in Asia, many of you think boys are better than girls. I want you to know that is completely wrong, totally wrong. Girls are much, much better than boys. So when you go home for lunch, be sure you have a girl and not a boy. You should do it for Korea. As you know, there's a huge shortage of babies in South Korea. A huge shortage of babies in South Korea, and especially a huge shortage of girl babies. So please, do it for yourselves, do it for Korea, and do it for the world. Now, speaking of Korea, I want to point out to some of you, because I'm afraid many of you don't know, the UPF hasn't been sitting around, the Moons haven't been sitting around for only 10 or 15 years working on all of this. As some of you may know, in North Korea, they actually had an automobile company. Reverend Moon founded the automobile company in North Korea. So somebody has been doing something up there, this group especially. You can also, some of you know that there's prospects for a tunnel from Japan to Korea. started by Reverend Moon and his foundation and his church. So there is possibility of change, and the foundation has other prospects as well. This is the automobile that they were manufacturing in North Korea. I find that most people don't know they manufactured cars in North Korea, but Mr. Reverend Moon started it. It can happen. Change can happen. This tunnel started, they have drilled a few hundred meters of the tunnel from Japan to South Korea. Someday, when the 38th parallel opens, we're all going to get in our cars and drive from Tokyo to London. I want to be in the first car. I want to drive literally, I want my daughters and I to drive from Tokyo to London through the tunnel, and I hope all of you will go. We will stop at the DMZ, the former DMZ. We'll have a big party again. But this all can happen, and it can be big change for the world. You all know where this is, but we cannot put the tunnel, Unfortunately, we cannot drive to London as long as the DMZ is there. So the tunnel clearly cannot be built while the DMZ is there. It's a long way from Tokyo to London, but it can happen. When we open up the 38th parallel, you're also going to find that Korea can become a transportation hub again. As you know, there's a railroad on the East Coast, a railroad on the West Coast, not in use now, but they're both being rebuilt. And once Korea opens the 38th parallel, then Korea can join into the One Belt, One Road rail system, as well as the Russian rail system. There's a Trans-Siberian Railroad. So Korea can become a great transportation hub again. It used to be, but of course that's all disappeared when you close the DMZ and the 38th parallel because of the war. But let's finish all of that. Let's make Korea wildly prosperous again. It can happen. It should happen. As you can see, the South Korean economy has been prosperous for a long time, and it can be even more prosperous once we open the 38th parallel. Korean currency has been a stable currency for a long time, in contrast to many countries. But South Korea, has been doing well. It can do even better, and it can be the most exciting place in the world. The negative, of course, is that South Korea has built up huge debt in all of this time. You've had a prosperous economy, but you built a lot of debt. Now, I'm an American, and so when I'm talking about debt, I will tell you, America is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. So I don't particularly think that debt is a good thing. I know my country, my children are going to have a huge problem with all this debt. Well, South Korea has a problem too, which is another reason to open the DMZ. North Korea doesn't have any debt. Nobody will lend money to the Kims, so they don't have any debt. So when you have a unified country again, South Korea has the debt, but North Korea doesn't have the debt, so the whole situation will be much, much better. Your population has been growing. I hope that continues. Part of the problem, of course, is in South Korea, many of you have been marrying foreigners because there's a shortage of girls. There's no shortage of girls in North Korea. So opening the parallel will also help some of the social problems in South Korea. You don't have to worry about getting foreign women anymore. You can marry Korean women. And as you know, whenever there's tension, people don't like to have babies when they're about to have a war or when there are problems in the economy. So when we open this up, when we open the DMZ and we have our party, you'll have females again, plenty of females. We can have babies again, and South Korea and the Korean Peninsula can be an extremely, extremely exciting place. You'll have more girls once the war prospect ends and the economy is revived. So I commend the YPF. I hope that you will open the 38th parallel soon. I hope our next meeting is not a peace conference. I hope it's a big party at the DMZ. Thank you.